Thanks for making Wish TV Indiana's most watched television station.
Welcome to Top Story. I'm Ken Owen. President Clinton prescribes a cure for the nation's ailing economy, but are Americans willing to pay the price?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Wednesday, the president went before Congress and the American people to outline one of the most ambitious economic plans in history, one that calls for deficit reduction and what the president refers to as personal sacrifice.
We're going to have no sacred cows except the fundamental abiding interest of the American people. The test of this plan cannot be what is in it for me. It has got to be what is in it for us.
In his speech, the president called for a $500 billion program of new taxes and spending cuts. As expected, he proposed increasing the top income tax rate to 36%, with a surcharge for those making more than $250,000 a year. And he wants the top corporate tax rate hiked to 36% as well. Clinton called for higher taxes on Social Security benefits for the program's wealthiest recipients, and he wants a broad-based energy tax. The tax, the White House says, will cost middle-income families no more than $10 a month. In fact, says Clinton, under his plan, middle America would suffer very little.
98.8% of America's families will have no increase in their income tax rate. Only 1.2% at the top.
As for spending, Clinton wants $30 billion in investment projects, ranging from roads and bridges to summer Head Start programs. Projects that he says would create 500,000 jobs. But that would be coupled with some 150 spending cuts, including reductions in military spending and farm subsidies. And the president wants to reduce the federal workforce by 100,000. In addition, Clinton called for bold reforms in welfare and health care. The Republican response was polite, but very critical.
In 1992, candidate Clinton said, tax only the super rich. Then in 1993, President Clinton now says, if you earn more than $30,000, your taxes are going up. So much for not taxing the middle class.
This is exactly what he told us during the campaign he wouldn't do. And it doesn't seem to me appropriate to say that George Bush, who fought for 2 years before finally giving in, should really get hammered because he signed a tax increase, while Bill Clinton, who apparently fought for about 2 hours before giving in, should somehow be exonerated because, after all, look at the changes.
Will the president's plan lead America out of the red and into the future? Or is it more of the same old song, tax and spend? We'll look for answers to these questions and more as we examine this week's top story. Even though some figures indicate the American economy is improving, the dark clouds just won't seem to go away. Less than 24 hours after the president addressed the nation, the Boeing Corporation announced the elimination of some 28,000 jobs. And here in Indiana, Hoosiers could be facing a double dose of higher taxes. Wednesday at the State House, the House Ways and Means Committee passed a bill that includes the proposed state budget for the next 2 years. For now, a tax increase is not included, but lobbyists are trying to change that.
There needs to be some kind of tax increase in this state.
We just think that there's just not enough money in there to make this work. We are supportive of a tax increase.
We do not believe the present budget will meet the needs of Indiana schools.
That measure now goes on to the full House. What do local economists think about the president's proposals? In a moment on Top Story, we'll talk with IU economist Morton Marcus, IUPUI's David Bivin. Also joining us, he's not really an economist, but can talk about how this could affect business, Chris LaMothe, who is the president of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. But first, how is the president's speech playing with Hoosiers? We sent our Rick Dawson on the road to East Central Indiana to get some answers.
On a cold day in rural Indiana, you have to go a long way to find anyone to talk about the president's plan. But once you find someone, an opinion isn't far behind.
I think they need to try something because what's going on right now isn't working.
I think he's done a lot of good if he does, if he goes through with everything takes place. But personally, I think he might be given a snow job.
A lot of Hoosiers accept the idea, the concept of a new economic plan. They start hedging when they consider how much it's going to cost them.
The average American family will pay an extra $12 a month in higher energy taxes.
My wife has pretty good income, and so do I, so we're gonna pay a bundle.
They're also contemplating the plan in Economy Indiana.
think it has to happen. I mean, you got a $4 trillion debt. Somebody has to pay somewhere, and if it takes the people all to pull together and do it, then I'm all for it.
At the grocery store in farmland, the Clinton plan has been the talk of the butcher counter.
Just nobody was surprised, and everybody knew that he was promising what he couldn't deliver, and most people fell for it, evidently. Our poultry supply.
And then there are some who didn't bother watching the speech anyway.
I watched the IU game instead.
In Randolph County, Rick Dawson, Wish TV, News 8.
And in News 8's televote poll this past week, we asked if you are willing to support President Clinton's economic plan. We received over 11,000 calls. The vote was close, but a majority of Hoosiers said no. 53% said no, 57% said yes, they'd go along with the president's plan. We want to remind you, televote is an unscientific poll, and 2 nationwide polls that came out in the past week suggested that people across the nation like the plan. Joining us now, IU economist Morton Marcus, IUPUI's David Bivin, and also Chris LaMothe from the Indiana State Chamber of Commerce. We're going to have a wide-ranging discussion, but let's begin by talking about this plan and its ramifications for the U.S. economy. Will it turn things around, and can it really reduce the deficit? Mr. Marcus.
I think it can turn things around, but the president made certain points that are very important. One is we have to break down the skepticism that people have about government. This is really one of the corrosive factors in our society. And if the president and the Congress can get together on a program that is reasonably comprehensive, that addresses a large number of the issues that we're concerned about, I think there's a chance to break down that skepticism. That's one of the most serious problems we have.
Mr. Bivin?
I'm inclined to agree. I think that there are things that the government can do better than the private sector does, and I think Bill Clinton has managed to hit on some of those things. The possibility of these apprenticeship programs, for example, the investment tax credit, I think all of these things are good for the economy in the long run.
Mr. LaMothe, you represent business as the president of the State Chamber of Commerce, and there's a lot of concern about what this plan could do to small businesses across the country. What's your view of it?
Well, I guess let me preface my comments by first saying that, like most Americans, I think now is a time for change. We have to see some dramatic and bold change. Unfortunately, I don't think that President Clinton advanced any real bold changes. It's essentially tax and spend, and I believe that the business community is hurt by this particular program.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because the day after the speech, Thursday, some documents were released that outlined exactly where these cuts would come from, where the spending would go, and they suggested the deficit reduction would be some 34% less than what the president had suggested in his speech the night before. Is it more tax and spend liberal Democratic policies?
I think that it's, first of all, we shouldn't get hung up on these specific numbers. They're all based on projections and then adjustments off of those projections. And it's sort of like trying to figure out what the Cubs are going to be doing in June. It's something that rational people just don't do. But I think that the issue of tax and spend is that that's really what government does. Government takes in money, and government puts out money in terms of valuable services. The problem is that we haven't had government spending money on the right kinds of things over the past 10 years. We haven't been spending enough money on investing in the future. And we have had a tremendous amount of private spending on perhaps some things that we shouldn't be spending so much on. We spend a great deal of money on recreation and entertainment in the United States. We complain that basketball players and baseball players and football players get paid enormous sums of money. They get paid that kind of money because people are willing to go see them, and because CBS pays the baseball networks, has the baseball network contract.
But you're asking people to realign their priorities.
Absolutely. That's what the president's talking about. That's what Chris is talking about when Chris says we need some changes in our society. And the changes in our society is that Americans have to consume less. And the easiest thing to cut back is in the area of recreation. Now, if higher taxes on individuals will have them cut back a little bit on some of their recreational spending, that's great. I'd like to see a specific tax on recreation.
Interesting idea. Mr. LaMothe, now one of the concerns is, of course, you raise the corporate tax rate, the top corporate tax rate by 5%. That, many people say, will be passed along to consumers. In the end, we'll be paying more for cars and television sets and other appliances. Do you see that coming?
Well, I do, and I think that there's some real danger in that. First of all, President Clinton came out and said that he supported small business. In fact, he called small business the engine of growth for our economy, and he is right. When you take a look at the demographics across the country, most of the growth in terms of jobs and investment is going to come from small business. But he is taxing small business. He is raising that that tax to 36%, and he is getting, through subchapter S corporations and corporations, a higher tax rate, and that money typically would have been invested back into the business. So I think that there's a problem with that, and it is going to be a drag on the economy.
Well, we have to be fair also, and that is he's offering for businesses with, what, less than $5 million in sales, he's offering investment tax credits. I think the investment tax credits should be across the board. But that's really what we should be seeing, is a tremendous emphasis by business on investment, and he should be encouraging that. So in a way, that would be giving the money back to business to create more income.
I think that's helpful. However, the thing that concerns me about President Clinton's plan is he essentially is saying, as we have heard government say before, that they're going to raise $360 billion in taxes, and government is better able to spend and invest that money than the private sector. I would have liked to have seen something more imaginative in terms of helping business steer into the correct areas, either through tax incentives or other kinds of programs like that.
Is there a concern, Professor Bivin, that this might lead us into another recession? That's the concern right now among some economists, that we seem to be slowly, very gradually coming out of this slump we've been in. Could this send us back down the hill?
Well, the economy has started to grow pretty rapidly since the middle of last year, and I think that we're set for even more rapid growth. We don't find much of that showing up in terms of employment. That is, the employment hasn't been growing very rapidly, but the economy itself has been doing pretty well. I think, however, that the factory work week is fairly long now. Firms don't have much inventories on hand. These things bode well for a continued expansion. If he engages in, if he starts introducing tax increases and things of that sort, that might put something of a damper. Whether it will cause us to go back into another dip or not, I can't say.
We'll talk some more about that and talk about the implications for Hoosiers when Top Story continues. Stay with us.
First to warn you of the winter storm. First with news of the fatal fire, the trooper slaying, and the abducted Greenfield woman. Best coverage of the season's biggest snowstorm, the Green tragedy, and the Larry Bird celebration. And the only station with the prisoner manhunt, the phone scam closing, and the Bobby Knight interview. The first, the best, the only one to watch. 24-hour News 8 on today's Wish TV. It's the best news you'll get all day.
Some home equity lenders tease you with low introductory rates. Not the money store. Right now, we're offering qualified homeowners fixed-rate home equity loans as low as 8%. That means after 90 days, your low rate would be 8%. And after 2 years, just 8%. At the money store, we guarantee your low fixed rate will never go up. Apply right now. 1-800-LOAN-YES. The Money Store, where America goes for money.
$4 trillion in debt. We're going into debt $1 billion every working day. If you let this trend continue, it just goes straight through the roof, as the president covered last night. A year ago, nobody ever talked about it. So, as I've said, initially I said the debt is like a crazy ant we keep in the basement. Nobody talks about her.
She's out.
She's at the inaugural ball now, thank goodness.
The man who drew nearly 20% of the popular vote as an independent presidential candidate, Ross Perot, gives President Clinton high marks for being straightforward with the American people and for addressing the federal deficit. How will this plan, if it's enacted, and we'll get around to that in a minute because if is the key word, I think, this week, how will this plan affect people in Indiana? Several studies have shown that Indiana hasn't been as affected.
That's just the wrong question. Now, Ken, you did exactly what the president said. We saw a clip earlier. The president said, in effect, don't ask that question. He said, don't ask what it means to me, ask what it means to us.
Now, but Morton, as a resident of the state and as a journalist in the state and with people watching, they want to know how is this going to affect the state of Indiana, which really hasn't been hammered as hard as other states during the past recession.
Well, the state of Indiana has done better than other states in coming out of the recession, mainly because other states are doing so poorly, not because we're doing so well. I think that one of the most important aspects of this is what the energy tax is going to mean. And it's a very complicated tax, and it's going to affect each and every one of us. Indiana is a state that has always been very sensitive to increases in energy prices. And I could see this as being the most serious adverse consequence for Indiana.
Do you gentlemen buy the $10 to $12 a month for a typical middle-class family? This tax impacting them that much?
Well, of the Clinton plan, that, as you might expect, would be the one area that I was very happy to hear. Traditionally, business has been targeted at cleaning up the environment and has borne what I consider to be an onerous cost. Now we're starting to take a look at spreading the liability for cleaning up the environment to those people that are going to be affected by cleaning up the environment. So I'm very supportive of of all of us having some opportunity to participate in cleaning up this environment.
I have to say I'm skeptical that consumers won't be hit with a higher tax increase, at least in the long run. If we're going to have honest deficit reduction, we can't just hit the rich. There aren't that many rich out there. So you're going to have to bring the tax increases down into the middle class, I think, in a bigger way than he's been willing to do so far.
But some are saying that this is really going to hit the middle class the hardest, even though you've got the surtax on the very rich.
That may happen in the end, but from the program that he's announced so far, he's minimized the impact on the middle class.
And Professor Marcus, getting back to what you said a moment ago, when you challenged me, and it's good that you did, we were talking during Somebody has to. Got to keep these guys in check. Congress, in the past, has really picked apart programs, and what President Clinton said is, take this pill as a whole, don't chop it into little pieces and pass it around.
That's right. Again, he was trying to say we need to restore faith in the government of the United States. And the Congress, when a program is put in front of them, for instance, President Reagan, whether you agreed with his program or not, in 1981 had a program, the Congress took the easy steps and they avoided the difficult ones. They have never been willing to cut programs. There are very, very many programs out there that need to be shaved down. They're unwilling to do it because the American people don't want them shaved down. We don't want to lose those jobs. We want every finance center possible to be built in the state of Indiana. And the idea of cutting back isn't very popular.
But, you know, that gets into a political issue, but taking sacred cows out of the political process would be an amazing thing. Every congressman in the Capitol has a particular project he wants to talk about back home at election time.
Well, maybe mixing religion and agriculture isn't a very good idea.
I believe the best way to get at what Morton is talking about is to provide the president with a line item veto and a balanced budget amendment. That would be the quickest way to cut pork out of some of these bills.
Are you surprised that he didn't ask for that? Because typically Mr. Bush and Mr. Reagan year after year have gone before Congress and said we need a line item veto, and the Republican side stood up and cheered. This year Mr. Clinton didn't ask for that.
No, as I recall, he planned on asking for it, but he was challenged by the Congress, so he backed away from it, at least from the Democrats in the Congress. I agree. I think the line item veto could do some good if the president has the courage to exercise it. And as far as the issue of credibility is concerned, I think we've run out of credibility since maybe the mid-1980s. We passed the Graham-Hollings Act, which was designed to bring the deficit down to zero. Right. And the deficit is at record levels. What we've seen are a bunch of gimmicks and so on and so forth. But I think also that Bill Clinton has damaged the credibility himself by promising in his election campaign that on the one hand he was going to raise spending, on the other hand he was going to cut taxes, and then finally he was going to cut the deficit. And you simply can't do all three of those things.
And the bottom line is now I think the American public, regardless of where they stand on the tax increase issue, wants results. If this plan is enacted as Mr. Clinton has proposed it, where do you gentlemen see America being a year down the road, if not 4 years down the road?
Well, I don't think a year down the road you're going to be able to see very much, except perhaps somewhat in the healthcare area. I think that they are going to make some rather bold statements in the healthcare area, and probably the wrong ones to begin with. I don't think you attack people on their income. I don't think you want to attack the physicians and the healthcare providers. I think they should be looking for administrative economies, putting in the computer programs where they're needed. But I think we can make some progress on those kinds of things of increasing productivity.
Mr. Bivin?
Yes, I agree. I think Bill Clinton had a choice of either pursuing expansionary sorts of policies that would help the economy in the short run or pursuing deficit reduction. He seems to be going in the right way as far as I'm concerned. The programs he's pursuing, the investment tax credit, the deficit reduction overall, and the apprenticeship sorts of programs, those could have a long-term benefit that could really help the economy to grow, I think.
Again, I guess I would be a lot more excited about this plan if there had been maybe a 2-for-1 on taxes versus cutting government. The way it looks like it's shaping out right now, for every 76 cents of cut, there's $1 in tax. I would have, at the minimum, liked to have shifted that. One way for me to maybe restore some of my confidence would be let's see Congress cut before they increase taxes so that we know that that is actually going to happen. Traditionally, cuts have been prescribed by the president. Congress has not followed through, and I think that's where a lot of the American public has got a real problem with those people that are elected to government.
Chris LaMothe, David Bivin, you have one more point?
Yes, I was going to say Bill Clinton's going to have a real problem there because if you're going to cut spending in a meaningful way, you'll have to cut entitlements. And with his social programs, that's going to be a little difficult to do.
Mr. Bivin, Mr. Marcus, Mr. LaMothe, thank you very much for joining us this morning on Top Story. In a moment, can President Clinton sell his economic plan to Congress? The political ramifications. We'll talk to political analyst Brian Vargus when we come back.
You can win a vacation to Walt Disney World and ride the new Splash Mountain just by watching Designing Women, weekdays on Wish TV. You'll fly Delta Airlines, the official airline of Walt Disney World, and stay at a Disney resort. Simply count the number of times you see the mouse ears during the show. Then stay with Wish TV from 5 to 5:30 for your chance to call in and win. Daily winners receive a $100 gift certificate, a gold bracelet, dinner for 4, and a chance to make a splash. Watch and win with Designing Women weekdays at 4 on Wish TV.
Do you suffer from headaches, back, neck, or shoulder pain? Take a step toward better health. Chiropractic care could be the answer. I'm Dr. Maddox. With over 6 years of chiropractic school and 11 years in practice, I know when I can help. At Maddox Chiropractic, we use the latest equipment and trained therapists to help speed up your recovery. When you have a problem, don't wait. Most insurances are accepted, so call today.
Call today for a free spinal exam.
Welcome back to Top Story. We've been talking about how the Clinton economic plan will affect your pocketbook, but there are a lot of political considerations to be made, and joining us now is News 8's political analyst Brian Vargus to talk about those a little bit. First of all, your impressions of the Clinton speech. Did he deliver the home run he needed, considering the fact that as a new president he was realigning the speech, not calling it State of the Union, but also asking for a pretty major tax increase?
Two things about that I think are very important. One is that we keep talking about hitting home runs. People are always hitting home runs. I don't know
Score
what
a goal, okay.
Yeah, it had nothing really to do with it. What he did was he went out there and he said, look, I'm going to throw everything on the table. I'm going to try to be bold about this. And I'm going to challenge Congress to actually rethink the priorities of this country. I'm going to challenge them to talk about whether we're going to get rid of the deficit, which is a tremendous lodestone on the economy, or whether we're going to get rid of their sacred cows. And he basically threw down a gauntlet. And he said, I think the public wants this. I think I can gamble on the public pressuring their congressman. And then he said, he was very clear, I don't care about blame, I don't care about credit, let's just get the darn thing done. Now, I'm in a strange position of agreeing with my academic colleague, Morton Marcus, that there's a great disillusionment about government out there, and Bill Clinton is actually attacking that in some very real ways. And I think the overnight polls that showed that most people basically liked what he said, despite the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce here, which was articulating the Chamber of Commerce line, taxes are, we don't like them, and so on and so forth. That's been very common for them. Despite that, the public out there said, we're willing to pay a little if you're going to get rid of all of the talking back and forth and no action in Washington.
Well, Clinton's saying, I represent the man who's going to end the gridlock in Congress. It's time to move forward with a new political vision. The Republicans, in the meantime, are saying, hey, we represent Main Street America. We're trying to keep your taxes down. Who wins in this battle?
Well, fundamentally, I would hope that the public would win in this battle, although, sometimes those hopes get dashed. I think the Republicans are saying they represent mainstream, but I don't think they do. I'm not sure that Clinton can necessarily break the gridlock, but he ran on one word, change. And that's what he's really trying to do. This program that he enunciated was very bold. It's got very few specifics in it other than the 150 spending cuts that he laid out and some tax raises and the tax credit incentives. But it's basically a change. It's not politics as usual. He's doing, in a sense, what he said he was going to do. Whether he can pull it off depends as much on his ability to deal with the Democrats in Congress, many of whom ran against him in primaries, and the Republicans, the far right, like Newt Gingrich and so forth, in Congress, as it does with the American public. And what he's doing is he's going over them. He's using a Reagan-type strategy. He's out campaigning today.
And the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, Friday said we need some kind of deficit reduction package passed quickly to keep interest rates low and get the economy moving again. There's some more pressure.
And also foreign governments have said they like the basic idea of deficit reduction in the United States because the dollar has been positioned such against foreign currencies that they aren't being able to deal as well with us internationally. So there's a number of pressures that are building, but Congress has been able to stand there and applaud things like campaign reform, which he talked about, and then not do a darn thing about it. And so one should never underestimate the ability of Congress to avoid the obvious and the sensible.
And finally, Brian, before we leave you, let's talk about the Ross Perot factor. He came out right after the speech and said it was exactly what needed to be done. He wonders, though, whether Congress will go along with it.
Well, as critical as I was of Ross Perot during the campaign, there's a lot of Ross Perot in this speech, and fundamentally, I have to go along with my economist friends and say, you know, there's something in here that's very important. That's getting rid of the deficit. I think the issue is, will Congress buy it? And Congress is only going to buy it if the people who are watching this program let their representative know this is what I like and this is what I don't like about this very bold initiative.
News 8 political analyst Brian Vargus, as usual, a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Top story will continue in a moment. Don't go away.
And now this late-breaking story. Elvis has been sighted on the tiny Caribbean island of St. Vincent. For the latest, we go to Royal Parker in Washington.
Authorities here at the U.S. Post Office headquarters are all shook up over the announcement that the St. Vincent government has just released a set of Elvis Presley stamps, beating the United States by 6 months. And it's not only one stamp, Karen, but 9 different stamps showing Elvis in every stage of his career. Each stamp is 4 times the size of a regular U.S. stamp. They're legal for postage in St. Vincent and are recognized by postal authorities worldwide. These stamps are already a hot collector's item, Karen, because there's only a few thousand sets available compared to 300 million U.S. stamps that will be issued. Elvis fans can get them now at their face value of $9 plus postage and handling for all 9 stamps. They will also receive the pocket guide, 99 little-known facts about Elvis Presley, free.
To order your stamps, call toll-free 1-800-358-6300. That's 1-800-358-6300. Supplies are limited. Call now, 1-800-358-6300.
If a bill making its way through the state legislature becomes law, most of Indiana will remain on the same time as New York year-round. That means Hoosiers would enjoy an extra hour of daylight in the evenings during the summer. By an overwhelming majority, a House committee passed a bill that would put Indiana on daylight savings time from April through October. More than 30 people spent more than 2 hours testifying. Most favored it, citing the positive effect it would have on business and quality of life. Speaking for Indiana broadcasters, Wish TV General Manager Paul Karpowitz pointed out the confusion that currently exists for many television viewers in the state of Indiana.
That's why we are very concerned, particularly in our Fort Wayne market, about the confusion that we create as a television station when twice a year we have to shift programming. And at that point, we're forcing viewers who have developed viewing patterns to shift and try and find what was the 11 o'clock news at 10 o'clock and to find their favorite 7 o'clock show at 8 o'clock.
Those who opposed the bill included theater owners who say it would hurt their business and others who are afraid an extra hour of darkness in the morning would be dangerous for school students. The committee voted 11-1 to pass the measure. It now heads for the full Indiana House. Speaking of time, we're out of it. That's top story for this week. I'm Ken Owen. Thanks for watching and have a great day.
A fly on the wall. Elementary, junior high, and high schools around the area. You'd be surprised what you'd learn. 5 days, 5 schools, 5 lessons. Wish TV's I-Team focuses on education, starting Monday at 6. The top news team in the state, experienced, committed, familiar, and devoted to Central Indiana. Mike Ahern and Debbie Knox are there for you, only on Wish TV.